Hey, phototristan back with another video, and in this video let's talk about USB audio cables. Do they make a difference? Is it worth it to spend the money on an upgraded one versus just a generic, printer cable? Let's talk about that. So on the left here is just a generic USB A to B printer cable that came with, like one of my devices. I can't remember which device it came with, maybe a printer. And then on the right, I've got the Audioquest Carbon USB cable, which is one of the higher end Audioquest cables specifically for audio. I believe it costs about $150 depending on the length that you get. Whereas the generic cable is free or next to free, certainly under like $10 if you buy one on like Amazon or something like that. So it's, I think, a common misconception that the USB cable won't make any difference. That being said, let me state right off the bat that I think that it is worth it to get an upgraded USB audio cable, but don't break the bank. In other words, after a certain point, you're not going to hear much difference. But certainly when you get up beyond a USB printer cable, there is a difference. So yeah, I think it's a common misconception that, it's just, I's and O's, ones and O's, it's just the digital signal is just, ones and O's, and it doesn't make any difference because it's a digital signal that's being transmitted and either it works or it doesn't. I used to think that myself, for many years, but, experience and hearing different cables has actually convinced me otherwise. That's not to say that that isn't true. It is ones and O's, but the ones and O's are not transmitted through the USB cable digitally. They're actually transmitted, via an analog signal. So it's an analog electrical pulse representation of those ones and O's. And that analog signal is therefore prone to the same disturbance that you would get from any other analog, signal and cable, such as EMI and radio frequency noise emanating from the environment that you're in. Whether it be AC noise, noise generated by your host computer, just any electrical noise over the air and in the environment. Furthermore, the analog signal that's transmitting the digital ones and O's actually has a greater vulnerability to noise than your normal analog signal because it transmits at a much higher frequency. You do want to use a good USB cable. In the digital audio world, meeting the USB cable specification is only part of the equation. Not all DACs are created equal. Not all computers are created equal. Not all USB transceiver chips are created equal. So things like cable geometry, the materials used, the conductor, the dielectric, the termination plugs, and the shielding all influence the cable's immunity to electrical noise pollution. And when you do get an electrical noise pollution, that actually can lead to not only cutouts, but also increased jitter in your digital audio signal. Now that being said, I don't think you need to spend a ton of money on super expensive USB digital audio cables, but I do like the Audioquest Carbon that I have here. I also saw a post online or an article that said that Gordon Rankin, who is basically the inventor of asynchronous USB audio at Wavelength Audio, also likes and recommends the Audioquest Carbon cable. And switching to this cable, I definitely do hear a more euphonic sound. The treble is not as brittle and harsh and kind of smeared, and it's just more of a nice euphonic and present sound to my ears. Now granted, if you have kind of a crappy system, it may not resolve well enough for you to hear any difference. Also, the differences in different USB cables are very subtle. But if your system is a high-end system and resolves really well, I do definitely think an upgrade USB cable is merited. But the caveat being that you really only need to pay attention to a few things. First is shielding. Second is to make sure the USB audio cable has the right impedance of 90 ohms. There are many USB audio cables or just regular USB cables that don't conform to the 90 ohm impedance. Even some of their super high-end audio cables do not. So if the manufacturer does state that the cable conforms to the 90 ohm impedance or the specs for proper USB, that is definitely a plus. And also I think the look and feel and build quality also plays a part in it as well. There may be certain USB cables that, just don't look as nice as you might like in your, high-end audio system. And then also, of course, length plays an important role. You want to get the right length to connect your DAC to your computer, but also the USB audio spec specifies no longer than 5-meter USB cables. But what's interesting is some of the higher-end upgrade USB cables can actually run longer than 5 meters. For instance, the Supra cable made in Sweden states that they can go much higher than 5 meters just because their cables are designed so well. If the cable really made no difference at all, people would just use the absolute cheapest USB cable possible and never buy anything else. In fact, if the cheapest USB cable was actually better for your audio, you would see people seeking them out in like office surplus and office dumpsters and things like that, or thrift stores, and selling them on eBay for a profit because they would be so good. I've always found it really curious that the naysayers, the people who truly believe that something is not possible, that a USB audio cable cannot possibly change the sound or improve the sound between your computer and your DAC, always have to go to a great length to try to attempt to disprove it. But then a lot of other people say that they actually do hear a lot of difference, and I'm one of those people with the experience of trying many different USB cables and definitely hearing a difference with better USB cables. But I would really encourage you to do your own listening tests and experiments yourself in your own system. Because again, not all DACs are created equal, not all computers are created equal, not all ears are created equal. Maybe your ears are not as sensitive, as mine or as somebody else's, so maybe you won't hear a difference. But I think instead of just blindly saying that a USB audio cable does not make a difference without actually doing your own tests, is not really going to win you any credibility awards. In other words, you really do have to test this for yourself. Try to buy a cable with a good return policy, and if you don't hear a difference, then just return it. But if you haven't actually done the tests and you're just blindly believing that they don't make a difference, then it's going to be hard for me or other people to really take you seriously, because I myself have definitely heard a difference. So anyway, I really do like this Audioquest Carbon cable, and I think it has a really sweet sound to it compared to a cheap generic printer cable that I have used. But I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments field as well. Have you heard differences with different USB audio cables, or have you heard no difference? And I want to emphasize that this video is my personal experience, and it does not necessarily reflect an experience that you're going to have yourself, which is why I encourage you to do the test yourself rather than just believing random people on the internet, and myself included. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next video.